So this is all sort of up till now is what we will call the core usage. Yeah. So this is just the basic usage of how to deal with frames, switch between frames, or call database frames. Now let's look at an actual example, right? So let's look at the example that we sometimes deal with, right? Which is pushing results in another frame, right? Because this is something that we struggle with quite a lot. So let's clear everything. So you can either say clear, or we can say clear frames. Clear. Let's start with a clear blank slate. There is a command clear all, which clears everything, but I would just be careful. Yeah, with clear all, it really wipes everything off from the memory. So let's start with this, right? Now we have got rid of everything. We have nothing. We are back to our default, right? Now let's say, let's load our data set in here. Just use auto or any other data set. And let's say we do summary statistics of some variables, summary statistics of values, right? So for each way, let's not do the D, right? So for each variable, we'll get something like observations, mean, standard deviation, min, max. So add price, weight, right? And so quite a lot of times this kind of stuff needs to be used or pushed into tables, or you need to create different things. I don't know, like weighted price or unweighted price. So there's a lot of this summary statistics handling that needs to go into this, right? Let's see how we can push this into a new frame. So we say frame, create some summary statistics. Yeah. And in this summary statistics, we want to push three variables. We want to push the variable name, and we want to push the mean and standard deviation, right? So we want to create a variable summary statistics called summary statistics, which contains three variable names. A variable called variable. Let's just call it mean, so it's not confusing. A variable called name, a variable called mean, and a variable called standard deviation. Now, by default, Stata creates everything as numerical variables. So it's basically doing something like gen name equals missing, right? But what we really want to do is do something like generate name equals as a string variable. So this is something we need to do manually. So we basically say gen name string. You can say numerical or double or something like double mean st. This you don't need to specify, but for string variables you do need to specify, right? In which order they are created. You can even have a list, but if you want a specific order, you can say name, mean, standard deviation, something else, right? Another text. So then you need to do this manually, but you can have a string and then reorder variables later on. So let's do this. So we have now, what is it I'm happy about? String variable double means day. Maybe it means a specific thing. Oh, yeah. So you need to specify the length of the string. And now if we say frames directory, we'll say that we have a new frame called summary statistics. It has 0 observations and it has 3 columns, right? Let's check it quickly. Frame change some stats. And if we browse it, we'll see that we have 3 variables. It's string. This one is numeric. It's already as double, etc. Right? So this is already empty variables, right? Let's go back to our frame change default. Let's go back to our main frame. Now, what we can do, right, is we can push our summary statistics of these variables into this frame. Now, because you can only push summary statistics line by line, This is something, wait, let me just check quickly. Let me add one or two variables. So we can add headroom and trunk also. Okay, let's add headroom and trunk. Headroom. Right. So we use these 5 variables. So you can push your results to frames line by line currently. There's one exception of putting a whole matrix as it is into a frame, but currently it's line by line operations. So let's say for these 5 variables, we want to move the mean and standard deviation into a new frame, right? So you will have to write a loop for this. You will have to say something like for each x in 5 variables, right? Let's check if the loop is working. So for each x in price line, wait, okay, it's working. What we want to do is we want to summarize x. Let's see if this is working. So for each variable, we get the summary statistics. And so once you do a summary statistics, it will return your variables in all are locals or scalars in this case. So what we want is we want the mean and the standard deviation copied into the other frame. And then what we will say is that we will say frame post name of the frame, which is called summary statistics, is the name of the variable. Because it's string, we need to put it in double quotes. And then we say our mean and our RST, right? And so let's check this. Let's check this if see it works, right? So we run this. And so again, frames is not showing us any output, but if it's not giving an error, it has worked. Now let's go to the other frame. We say frame change some stats. And now if we browse, we will see that our variables and summary statistics have been added to this, right? And this kind of stuff, so for sure, there are lots of ways of exporting stuff directly, right? So there is a whole EST tab command, you have the status on collect commands, you can of course do this. But let's say creating a table or a data set of summary statistics or any other sort of stuff that you can extract makes life a lot easier, yeah? And this didn't have to be summary statistics, it could have been min, max value, confidence interval, upper bound, lower bound, skewness, kurtosis, etc., right? And so you have now a subset of your data set which can be used to do other things. I don't know, maybe you want to visualize this, or you maybe want to export this in a table, and this is way easier to work with than your raw data set. So let's go back. Let's go back to your frame change default, right? And so you can automate this also in a script, because if I now run this again, it will append everything frame some statistics list. Yeah, so it has appended everything again. So you can just do something like this, which is say capture frame drop some stats. Yeah, so in your scripts, you are basically making sure you're starting with a clean frame. And so you just drop the frame in your script. You just create it from scratch to make sure you're not keep on appending results to your frame. So, just a minor check in your workflow. And so this kind of stuff helps us a lot in collecting variables from summary statistics or other kind of operations. You could be doing t-tests between two variables. If you do you can do t-test price by column, right? So you can do a t-test. You can see you get this output. You can return the list. You get all sorts of statistics. Maybe you need these statistics for something, for some reporting or something, or you just export this to your data. There's a lot of tests typically I do on to check for outliers and stuff. You can create a data sets of flagged variables, for example. So you can automate the process where you say, okay, this variable in this row has some weird value, now let's automate this and check these 100 variables or something. Yeah. And this is a very, very useful way where you are combining, where you're exporting results from one data set to another, right? The next example, which is, let's say, also very common, regressions. So regressions, again, can become very painful to deal with. So if you're not doing standard OLS type stuff, if you're doing more advanced analysis with other types of regressions with newer packages, dealing with outputs can become super challenging, especially if the packages are not programmed in a, let's say, generic way. Let's start with a blank slate, clear frames, right? Let's start with the blank slate. And then let's use something. I'm just using a very random example, yeah, which is with very random, use NLS. Very random regressions, which are almost meaningless, right? So we are not doing anything exciting. So this is a panel data set that comes with Stata NLS work. So it's whatever has a person ID and a year. You can declare it as a panel data set. You can say xt set ID code year. And you will see that it's a fully balanced, it's not a fully balanced panel. It has 68 to 88 data observations, etc. Right? So you have something like this. So describe, if you do xt describe, it tells you how much of the unbalance exists. So for example, you can see that 138 observations have 1 year missing, so much of other years missing. Plus there are other patterns. So it's a very unbalanced data set. Okay, that's not the point. So we're not doing panel regressions. Let's do a sample regression, right? Like we say xt regress. This could be panel regression. It could be any regression. So we say ln wage. We say we regress log on wage on grade, age, tenure, like so, right? So we do a regression, right? It did not find. I'm so sorry. Let's just focus, right? So we do a panel regression, we get some out, right? Now, since it's a panel regression, we can do a fixed effects model. We can do a random effects model. We can do MLE model. So again, just with a simple panel, we can have different clustering of variables. We can have different controls. So let's say once you start doing regression analysis, you're basically testing quite a lot of stuff, right? So you're testing quite a lot of stuff, different specifications. You might add a square term, etc., right? And each regression is generating all of this stuff, right? So most of this is good for eyeballing what you're getting. So most of the time you don't even look at this stuff. And then you're also for each regression generating things like you're generating an R table. So it's a table, which is a table of all your coefficients and stuff, right? And now what we want is that we want each of these regressions to be pushed, the coefficient and the standard error to be pushed into a different into a frame. Yeah. So let's set up a basic workflow. Again, this is a very context specific workflow, but this is just to give you an idea of what you want to do, right? So let's say capture frame drop results. So we just make sure we don't have a frame called results. We say frame create results, and we want two descriptive variables. We can say string 15 We want the model, and we want something like variable. So these are, so model is something, whether it's a fixed effects, random effect model. We want another variable which tell us the variables whose coefficient we're interested in. And then we want mean and standard error. Yeah, so you can leave it as it is. You can define the precision. By default, it's generated as a float. So let's create this frame, right? And then if I do frames directory, we will say we have 4 frames. And if I say frame results list, it's empty. Describe. We have 4 variables, which is model, variable, mean, standard error, right? So currently there is no observations, but we have now created an empty frame which has these variables. Now let's start with our one regression. So let's say we run a regression, we get this. And so we can just basically, let's just do it more efficiently. So we can say local independent vars. Let's just say our independent variables were this, right? So we are now going into a more efficient workflow. We are not copy pasting hundreds of variables. We are just saying, let's just define a local, right? And we can do something like this, all right? So we got something like this. We have our independent variables, which we define as a local string, and we just pass this on. Now we can say for each x in with independent vars and also our constant, we say frame post results. So post it in the results frame. So we have 4 variables. The first one is a fixed effects model. So that's what we want. The second variable is our variable name. And then, like I said, if you do e return list, or wait a second, return list, yeah, that list table. We have these information stored in these locals, right? And so there is a way that Stata fetches this information, which is basically saying that we get the beta value of x and we get the standard error value of x, right? And so just to go over this slowly, right? We say we define these independent variables, so we can have multiple locals with different types of independent variables that we are passing on to this regression. It's just doing this. And then we are saying that for each of these variables plus the constant, right? Put the model name, fixed effects, put the variable name, put its beta coefficient and its standard error in our frame. So let's loop this in one go, right? Because we have a local, we run this in one go. And again, we get no information from the output, but what has happened is that our results from our regression has been posted in this frame for the variables that what we were interested in, right? Of course, you can export other things. You can export 50 other things from all of this. You can export the correlation coefficient. You can export R square, F stat value, etc., right? And now if I go to frames, change results, this is what we see. This is what we see in the sense that, so one variable was omitted. That for each, so we have the model, fixed effects model, and then we have the variable, its mean and its standard error. And you can also export other things like upper bound, lower bound of the confidence interval, t-stats, p-value. You can then convert p-value into significance levels, etc.